The call came at 3:17 inches the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold 2 hours earlier, staring at nothing. And when my phone lit up the dark room, I didn't even flinch. Some part of me had been waiting for it. My brother's name on the screen. Then my mother's. Then my father's. Then my brother again. I let them all go to voicemail. But I want to tell you how we got here, because this story doesn't start at 3 a.m. It starts about 11 years ago, in the parking lot of a Walmart in Dayton, Ohio, when I was 22 years old, and my mother called to tell me my father had lost his job and could I help out. Just for a little while. Just for a little while. I want to ask you something before I go any further, and I mean this genuinely. Have you ever said yes to someone when every single cell in your body was screaming no, not because you were weak, but because you loved them so much it physically hurt to imagine them struggling? Have you ever written a check that emptied your account and then gone to work the next morning and smiled like everything was fine? If you have, then you already know what the next 11 years of my life looked like. And if you haven't, stay close, because I think you need to hear this too. My name is Dana. I'm 33 years old. I'm a forensic accountant, which means my entire career is built on finding money people tried to hide and reconstructing the truth from paper trails. I work for a firm in Chicago. I'm good at my job. I am very, very good at my job. And it took me 11 years to turn those same skills on my own family. My brother's name is Marcus. He's 4 years older than me, which made him 26 that day in the Walmart parking lot when I answered my mother's call. He had a job. He had a steady girlfriend, who would eventually become his wife. He lived 15 minutes from my parents. I lived 6 hours away. I was the one she called. I tell you that not to make Marcus a villain right out of the gate. I tell you that because it's the detail I've replayed more than any other in the past 3 months, the simple arithmetic of who she called and who she didn't. Marcus was closer in every way. Geographically, emotionally, professionally. He had more stability than I did at 22. She called me. And I said yes. I transferred $800 that same afternoon. I remember thinking, this is temporary. They just need to get through this rough patch. My dad will find something new. Things will level out. And this will just be a story we laugh about at Christmas. I was so young. The transfers didn't stop. They slowed sometimes, sped up other times, but they never stopped. A year turned into 2. 2 into 5. My father found work eventually part-time at a hardware store, but my parents' spending never adjusted to match what he brought in. There was always a gap, and I was always the one quietly filling it. I kept a spreadsheet. Of course I kept a spreadsheet. I'm a forensic accountant. Every transfer, every date, every amount, not because I planned to use it against them. I kept it because it made me feel less crazy. When you give money to people who never acknowledge it, who never say thank you, who treat every transfer like it's something you owe them, rather than something you're choosing to give, you start to question your own memory. The spreadsheet was how I proved to myself that I wasn't imagining things. By the time I turned 33, that spreadsheet had 214 rows. The total was $47,300. I want to let that number sit there for a second. $47,300. Over 11 years. From a 22-year-old who was still paying off student loans, still building her career, still figuring out who she was. I never owned property. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I took exactly one vacation in 11 years, a long weekend in Michigan that I drove to because I couldn't afford to fly. My parents, during this same period, went to Cancun twice. My mother got a new living room set. My father bought a bass boat he used exactly 4 times. And Marcus, who lived 15 minutes away, who earned more than me by the time he was 30, Marcus contributed, to my knowledge, nothing. I found that out by accident, actually. About 2 years ago, I was visiting for Thanksgiving, and I overheard my mother on the phone with her sister, my Aunt Renee. My mother didn't know I was in the hallway. She was laughing about something, and then I heard her say, "Marcus does so much for us. He's always been the responsible one." I stood in that hallway for a very long time. the responsible one. Not a single dollar to his name in that spreadsheet, not one. But he came over for dinner every Sunday. He mowed their lawn a few times a year. He showed up in the ways that were visible, that could be witnessed and praised and told to Aunt Renee over the phone. And I had been the ghost wiring money from 6 hours away. Invisible, unnamed, unacknowledged, the responsible one. I went back to Chicago after Thanksgiving, and I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being mature. I told myself that what I was actually doing was avoiding a conversation I didn't have the strength for yet. Both of those things were true, and neither of them was the whole truth. The whole truth is that I still loved them. Even then, even knowing what I knew, and love, when it's been trained wrong, can keep you in rooms you should have left a long time ago. The wedding invitation arrived in February. Marcus and his girlfriend Stephanie had been engaged for about a year. The wedding was planned for late June, a Saturday, at a venue about 40 minutes outside Dayton. It was going to be a big event. 120 guests, a sit-down dinner, a band. I was asked to be there. Not asked to be in the wedding party that was Stephanie's 3 sisters and 2 of Marcus's college friends, but I was asked to attend. As a guest, I bought a dress. I took the day off work. I drove 6 hours. I want to pause here and be very honest with you about why I went, because I've thought about it a lot since. Part of me went because I genuinely wanted to celebrate Marcus. Despite everything, he was my brother, and he was marrying someone he loved, and there is a version of me that wanted to stand in a room and be happy for him. That version of me is real. But part of me also went because I was still hoping, even after 11 years, even after that hallway at Thanksgiving, I was hoping that at some point, in some room, my family would look at me and see me, really see me, see what I'd given, see who I was to them. That hope, I think, was the most expensive thing I ever paid for. The ceremony was beautiful. Stephanie was beautiful. I'll give them that. I sat in the 3rd row on the groom's side, and I watched my brother cry when she walked down the aisle, and I felt something real and soft in my chest. For about 40 minutes, everything was okay. Then we moved to the reception. I was seated at a table near the back with some of Stephanie's cousins I'd never met, and a college friend of Marcus's named Trevor, who spent most of dinner talking about a podcast he was trying to launch. Fine. I was fine with that. I had my dress on. I had a glass of wine. I was fine. The trouble started during the toasts. My father stood up first. He had a glass of champagne and a note card, and he talked for about 4 minutes about what a great man Marcus had become. How proud he was. How Marcus had always been the kind of son who showed up, who took care of things, who you could count on. I kept my face very still. Then my mother stood up. She talked about how Marcus had always been mature beyond his years, how when things were hard for the family and she paused there, meaningfully, dabbing her eye, Marcus was always there, steady, present, the kind of son who never let them down. I picked up my wine glass and I held it with both hands so they wouldn't shake. Then Marcus stood up to give his own speech about Stephanie, and at the very end, after he'd thanked his in-laws and his groomsmen and his college friends and his childhood pastor, he looked at my parents and he said, "And to Mom and Dad, who gave me everything, who sacrificed everything to raise me into the man I am. I would not be here without you." I counted to 10 in my head. I counted to 10, and I thought about $47,300. I thought about 214 rows in a spreadsheet. I thought about the vacation I never took, and the house I didn't own, and the Cancun trips and the base boat used exactly 4 times. I thought about the hallway at Thanksgiving, the responsible one. And then something happened that I did not expect, and I'm still not entirely sure how to describe it. It wasn't rage. It was quieter than that. It was more like clarity, like a fog I'd been living in for 11 years suddenly lifted, and I could see the room I was in with perfect, total, unflinching vision. I set down my wine glass. I opened my purse. I left $400 in cash on the table, my share of the gift, calculated to the dollar, and I picked up my bag, and I walked out of the reception. Not dramatically. No scene, no confrontation, no tears. I passed 3 people on my way to the door, and I smiled at all of them. I handed my valet ticket to the attendant. I drove out of the parking lot. And I did not look back. I cried for about 90 minutes on the drive back to Chicago. Not sad crying, exactly. More like pressure releasing. Like something that had been wound very tight for a very long time was finally being allowed to unwind. When I got home, I opened my laptop. I am a forensic accountant. I find money that people tried to hide. I reconstruct the truth from paper trails. And sitting at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night in June, I did what I had always known, somewhere in the back of my mind, that I would eventually have to do. I compiled the file. 214 transactions. Every date, every amount, every corresponding bank record. I pulled the screenshots I'd saved over the years. I wrote a clean, clear summary document, professional formatting, the kind I'd use for a client, laying out the full picture of what had moved from my account to theirs over 11 years. No editorializing. No emotional language. Just the numbers, the dates, and the facts. The total at the bottom of the document: $47,300. I sent it to one person, Aunt Renee. The responsible one, I wrote at the top of the email. I thought you might want the complete picture. I pressed send at 11:40, 2 p.m. on a Saturday night. And then I went to bed, and I slept better than I had in years. The calls started Sunday morning. My mother first, at 8 a.m. Then my father. Then Marcus, 4 times before noon. I let them all go to voicemail. My phone was ringing so often that I eventually put it face down on the counter and made myself a proper breakfast: eggs, toast, coffee, and sat at my table in the quiet and ate every bite. By afternoon, texts started coming in. From my mother: Dana, please call me, this is a misunderstanding. From my father: you had no right to do this. Call me now. From Marcus: what is wrong with you? Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Call me. I read them once. I put my phone down. I finished my coffee. That night, the calls slowed down. I thought maybe they'd decided to give me space. I made dinner. I watched something on television. I went to bed around 10. At 3:17 the morning, my phone lit up the dark room. Marcus. Then my mother. Then my father. Then Marcus again. This is where I came in. This is the moment I told you about at the beginning. And now you know everything I knew as I sat at that table, in the dark, watching the screen light up again and again. I let them go to voicemail. In the morning, I listened. My mother's message was mostly crying. Underneath the crying, a few recurring phrases. This is not who we raised you to be, and you've humiliated this family. And we didn't know, Dana. We didn't realize. Please. My father's message was shorter and angrier. He wanted me to call him back so we could discuss what I'd done. He used the word vindictive twice. Marcus's last message was the one I've thought about the most. He was quiet on it, quieter than I expected. He said, I looked at the numbers. I didn't know. I really didn't know the whole picture. And I'm not saying what you did tonight was fair, because it wasn't. But I want to talk. When you're ready. Okay? When you're ready. I've listened to that message 4 times. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure what I want to say, or whether there's anything to say that would matter right now. What I know is that for 11 years, I tried to hold something together with money and silence and an endless reservoir of hope, and none of it was ever acknowledged, and none of it was ever enough. What I know is that you can love people and still reach a point where love without honesty is just a slow way of disappearing. What I know is that Aunt Renee called me on Sunday afternoon, not from anger but from something gentler, and she said, I had no idea, sweetheart. None of us did. And that she cried a little, and I cried a little, and she said she was proud of me. And that was the first time in a very long time that I felt like someone in my family could actually see me. That phone call lasted 47 minutes. I counted. Because the woman I've become counts things. A lot of people, when they hear stories like this, want to know what happens next. Does the family reconcile? Does Marcus come around? Do the parents apologize, really apologize, in a way that's worth something? I understand the impulse. We want the resolution. We want to know it works out. I can't tell you that yet, because I genuinely don't know. What I can tell you is what I've learned, which is this. The moment I walked out of that reception hall, something shifted permanently, not in anger, in understanding. I finally understood that I had been playing a game where I kept putting in, and never asked for anything back, and I had somehow convinced myself that was love. That selflessness was supposed to feel like erasure. It's not. Real love, the kind worth staying for, is not invisible. It doesn't require you to hollow yourself out. It doesn't keep score exactly, but it doesn't pretend the score doesn't exist either. You are allowed to have been wronged. You are allowed to say, I have given you $47,000 and 11 years of my life, and I would like someone in this family to say my name. I would like someone to say my name. I took a long walk last week. Chicago in summer is a different city, people everywhere, the lake looking like something out of a painting. The kind of evening where you remember why you moved somewhere and chose a life. I walked for 2 hours, and I thought about all of it. The spreadsheet, the wedding, the voicemails, Marcus's message about wanting to talk. I thought about Aunt Renee saying I had no idea, sweetheart. I thought about the drive home from the reception, the 90 minutes of crying that felt, somehow, like relief. And I thought about something a therapist told me once. I've been in therapy for about a year now, which is a different kind of accounting, tracking a different kind of ledger. She told me that the opposite of invisibility isn't revenge. It's witness. It's having someone look at the true record of your life and say, I see this. I see what this cost you. That matters. I used to think sending that document was revenge. Maybe it was. A little. In the moment. But sitting on the other side of it now, I think what it really was, what I was really doing at 11:42 on a Saturday night, was making myself visible. Making the real record available to the people who'd been reading a false one. I don't know what my brother and I will say to each other when I'm finally ready to talk. I don't know if my parents are capable of the kind of honesty that a real conversation would require. I don't know if $47,000 and 11 years can be metabolized into something other than grief. But I know this. I drove home from a wedding. I made myself breakfast. I slept. I walked by the lake. I am here, in my apartment, in the life I built while I was also quietly building theirs. And for the first time in 11 years, all the money is mine. I just want to ask you one thing before I go, and I really want to know. Have you ever given so much of yourself to someone that you stopped being able to see where they ended and you began? And what did it take for you to finally find the line? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you feel seen, even a little, you know what to do. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves out there.